and then restart my screen. Okay. Okay, so what we're going to be doing to create our website is using a website called replit.com. So if you click on here, it's going to take you to this page. I'm already signed in. I already have an account. So you'll need to create an account. If you go to the page and you're not signed in, this is what it's going to look like. So you can just click sign up. And you can use, if you're already logged in on your computer to Google, you can just use the Google to create an account, or you can make an email and create an account that way. So it's pretty straightforward, like any web service that you would use. And Replit is basically a web-based IDE. You can see it says right here in this message, it says you can chat with your coding AI directly in your IDE. So IDE stands for Integrated Development Environment. I'll write that in the chat because it's big words. And that's just basically a way of saying that everything that we need to create our website is in one place, and we can see it all at the same time. And so this is a pretty standard way of creating a website or programming in general. It's really useful that this is web-based because we don't have to go over where to save your files and how to create a server on your computer and all this other stuff that we used to have to do. So that's the nice thing about using Replit. It also has a lot of nice built-in tools. For example, it has this AI that's built in now, and it's called Ghostwriter, and you can ask it questions and it get feedback on your code. And so it's really easy to get started. At least you can get this kind of like interactive feedback. So I encourage you guys to try that out. I haven't actually used it very much, so I'm not going to probably use it in the demo, but it's a good thing to try. But I'm going to close out this little ad. So once you log into Replit, you're going to see something that looks like this. This is your homepage. You can create a new project using this big blue button here. You can also organize your projects if you go to My REPLs. And you can see I have some different REPLs here. I have the MMP 100 folder, and I'll probably put stuff in here for this class. So you can create folders. If you want to organize stuff, you don't really have to. You might not have that much stuff that you need to organize, but if you want to make a new folder, you can do that here. I'm going to go into my MMP 100 folder. You can also, let's see, there's tutorials under the Learn section. There's a forum under Community where people ask questions about how to do various things. You can change the look under Themes. None of this stuff is really super necessary, but there's some interesting stuff in there. If you want to, test your coding skills, you could go to bounties and try to, get paid opportunities on here. I've never actually tried this, but it's kind of interesting. They have that built in. But mainly we'll just use the folder and then creating a project. So I'm going to open up MMP 100 and I'm going to make a new REPL here. And so if I want to get started using Replit, I just click on this big blue button, Create REPL. So I'm going to click there. And then it has these different templates that we can use for all sorts of different languages. And the one that we're going to use, you can see it's a favorite of mine because I've used it before. But if you don't see it there, just type in HTML and you'll see this come up. And we just want the basic HTML, CSS, JavaScript. So as we talked about in the web development lecture, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript are the main three web technologies that are used to make a website. Today, we're just going to talk about HTML, so we'll just focus on that. But the nice thing about these templates is it actually creates your files for you. So it'll make it a little bit faster to get started. Usually, we have to go over creating each file individually. So it's nice that it's just going to make this for us. You can, let's see, make a title for this. I'm just going to call this MM100 HTML Basics. Just going to get started with some basic HTML. And then I'm going to click this blue button, Create Replit. And so the kind of crazy thing about Replit is once you create this, it's actually going to already have written a lot of HTML for you. So there's a lot of stuff in here that like we're already kind of like a few steps beyond where we would normally be if this was 5 years ago or 10 years ago. So that's kind of exciting, but we also have to back up a little bit and go over some of the basics. So you don't have to write everything from scratch. I tend to write things from scratch, but it's nice that they fill this stuff in for you, especially because for web developers, we end up writing the same things over and over and over again. I used to make websites as a freelancer before I started teaching, and I kind of still do sometimes. And the number of times I've written this basic, what you're looking at right here, is like a million times. So it's nice that they do that for us. This is a basic interface, so I'll go over a couple things here, and then we'll write some HTML. So basically, it divides up these different windows, and that's what the IDE part means. Usually, these would be separate applications. Like I'd have a text editor to write my code. Then I'd have like another application open to run a server on my computer to kind of pretend that my website is online. And then I have a browser to show what the website actually looks like. And they have all of those built in here. You can see, here's my code. This is the index.html page. That's the main page of my website. Down here, this tab has the ghostwriter, which like you can ask it how to write code and it'll tell you. So you might want to use that. I'm going to close this out for now, just for this demo. So I'll just close that. Now we just have the web view. This just shows what our website looks like. And it even publishes it online. So if I click on this little open in a new tab, this website that I just created, I haven't even written any code yet, but it's already online. I can send this to you guys and you'll be able to see it. So if I copy this link, you'll be able to open that up and see the website I'm working on. Another nice thing with Replit, I can copy this. I wouldn't do this right now. You might want to do this later because I haven't actually done anything yet. But if you go to that link that I just pasted, you can actually you can duplicate my project and just build on top of it. So that's another nice thing about the platform is you can very easily take other people's projects and work on them. I'll show you guys how to do that towards the end of this demo. And then you can also invite people once you are a Replit member to collaboratively edit a document. So that's another nice feature. If you're working on something and you're confused about something, you can actually add me onto your project, and I can type out some code into your project. How it works. That's a really great feature. I use it a lot right now. I'm working on an independent study with a student this semester who's making a really complex website with a back end and all this different stuff. And so I can just log on and read her code and help her edit stuff without having to like do anything else. I just go onto the website. So I'll go over some more of those features in a bit. There's a few other things with the interface. So there's a button right here where you can open and close this sidebar. The sidebar shows you the files and then the tools, and then also your usage on their backend. So how much of their computer power you're using. They don't let you use that much, but you should be fine making a basic website. Most of what we'll look at is this files right here. These are the main files of our website. You can see there's an HTML file, a JavaScript file, and a CSS file. We're not going to edit the CSS or the JavaScript file quite yet. We're going to stick with the HTML, but those are there. You can also create new files with this button here, new file, and a folder. You can create a whole folder with this button here. We're going to do that in a little bit. And then there's some options under here to upload files from your computer or download your project or do other things here. And then you can, of course, just close this whole section using that button if you want to get more space. There's some tools down here. We're not going to go over these right now, but we might cover them in the future. And then over here, we have the web view, of course, and then this shell. That's basically your server. We're probably not going to use this, but that's a terminal prompt, and you don't really need to know how to work with the terminal, but that's what web developers tend to work with. And so I can put commands into the terminal to learn things about my website. So for example, if I do ls, it's going to list all the files on my website. If I do pwd, it's going to show me where I am on the server. I can also I can do a lot of things in the shell, but we're not really going to use that that much in this class. We're just going to stick with the web view. So I'm going to close this. And then there's a big run button here. You can also run your website by hitting Control Enter. So if I make changes, like I'll just change this text real quick, and then if I make a change and then I hit run, it's going to refresh my website. And you can also do that. What I tend to do is use Control Enter, and that will just do it for me. So that way I don't have to move my hands to use my mouse. I can just keep typing and hit Control Enter again, and it's going to update my website again. So that's basically the interface. There's other stuff that you can do that we'll talk about later, but that's pretty much the basics. So now we can get into some HTML. I'm actually going to go ahead and just delete this whole document so we can go over this from scratch. So I'm going to hit Control A to select all of the text here and then just delete it. And notice that if you don't have anything in your document, it's like telling you, oh, you could use Ghostwriter, or you could look at some examples. So I'm going to ignore this, but it's nice that it has those there. And then actually one thing I might do, I'm going to go to my tools and go to settings, and I'm just going to set my font size to large. I think this will make it a little bit easier for you guys to read. Obviously, you don't need to do this, but there's other stuff in the settings that you might want to look at. So I'm just going to increase the font size a little bit and then go back to here. So now let's start writing some HTML. HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. It's basically what every website is built on. And it's very simple. If we look at the first website that was ever built, this is still online. You can see it right here, I think. I don't know if I showed this during the lecture, but this is the first website that was ever published. And you can see it's very simple. It's just black text on a white background. There's no images, there's no videos. But the web that we use today uses the same basic technology. The one main thing that you notice is that there's a lot of blue text, and these are hyperlinks. And that was kind of the main goal of the original web, is to create pages that were accessible anywhere in the world and could link to other pages. And so it was used as a way to basically share knowledge. You could write some information and then you could link to different references or other things related to that topic. So for example, under here I can go to the bibliography, and this shows me a bunch of other information. And so what we're going to make today isn't going to really look too much different from what we have here, this kind of basic setup. But obviously, this same technology can be used to make lots and lots of different, more interesting websites now. And web development has really grown, where we have lots of new languages and different technologies that we use to create more dynamic and engaging websites. So anyway, let's get started writing our HTML. You'll notice that this page is called index.html. Since it's been made for us, I don't have to spend as much time kind of going over this, but this is one of the main things that we'd have to go over in the past, is that every website has to have an index.html page. If you don't have that page, then when a browser goes to your website, they're not going to know where to go. So every single website has one of these index.html pages. So that's always where we start. You can make lots of other HTML pages as well, and that's something that we will do pretty soon as we learn some basic. Okay, so let's write our first HTML tag, and this is going to be very exciting. It's just the tag HTML that tells our document that it is an HTML document. And so writing HTML contains a couple parts that you guys are probably not going to be super familiar with. So I'm going to go the very basics. So every HTML tag is contained within two brackets, and the brackets are these little less than and greater than signs that look like that. And they're on your keyboard. They're usually you have to hold Shift and hit the comma and the period key, and you can make a left bracket and a right bracket, and they're the little angles. Sometimes you can refer to them as the less than sign and the greater than sign, but those are the main way we separate our HTML markup from the content of the page. So HTML has markup, which is like the code that tells it where to go on the page. And then it has content, which is like the text and other things that we see on the page. So we're going to start with a bunch of markup. And the first tag that we're going to write is just this HTML tag. And the nice thing about Replit you're going to see is that it actually does a lot of stuff to help us write our code for us and understand what the code means. So we can see right there, there's a hint that says the HTML element represents the root of an HTML document. That is a very good description. It even has a link to the reference where this comes from. So we can go here and read about how this works, and we can even see examples about it. So it's actually really, really convenient. Oh, we have to write this. We'll go back and do that in a second. Replit makes it very easy to write HTML in that sense. I still feel like my text is too small. I'm going to make it even bigger. And then if I run out of room, I will change that. Okay. So most HTML elements, after we start the element, we have to close the element. So to close an element, I do the same thing. I write HTML like this, and then, Replit is doing some stuff for me. I don't want this quite yet. Then I put a forward slash at the end here. Okay, Replit is trying to help me, but it's getting a little confused, which is okay. So that's what a basic HTML element looks like. There's always, or not always, but most of the time there's an opening part and then a closing part. Okay, so this basically says this is where my document starts, and then this says this is where my document ends, and everything I put inside here is contained within the document. So this is called a hierarchical structure, and it kind of is used to represent information in a lot of different ways. And it's based on, like normal sort of like organization. Like you might have a folder, and in that folder you have more folders if you have a lot of different types of things, right? If you have a folder, if you have like a folder at home or a box at home with different folders in it for like, your schoolwork. Maybe you have a folder for your taxes. We just did taxes. You might have a folder for, letters, other things. And then inside those folders, you might have other subfolders for specific documents and stuff like that. So HTML works the same way. So everything that we want on our page has to go in between these two HTML tags. So that's our first basic tag. There's actually one that usually goes above here. One thing that's nice about HTML though is it's very forgiving. So if I run this, I don't have any content, but it also doesn't tell me I can't do that or anything. HTML is very forgiving. If we make mistakes, it usually tries to figure out what we meant to do and just show our website anyway. But I forgot one element, which is the first element, which actually doesn't have an opening and closing, which is this doc type HTML. This is basically just telling my browser that this is an HTML page. So that usually looks like this, and you can see Replit knows what I'm trying to say. So I just hit enter to accept that suggestion, and we say doc type HTML. So if you forget to add this in, your browser will probably still figure it out. But this is what we used to write to tell the browser what type of document. So I know this is really exciting, but it is going to get more interesting eventually when we're going to add some content in here. So we've got our first HTML tag, and we're going to write some more HTML. And what we'll start with now is every website has two components. One is the head section of the website, and one is the body section of the website. And if you want to, test this out, you can look at any website. You can look at the code of any website very easily. That's a nice thing about the web is that it's open, so you can see the source for any website. So if we go back to our first website, if I right-click on here and go to View Page Source, it's actually going to show me all of the HTML. This is really old HTML, so it looks kind of wacky. But you can see it here. So this isn't the best example, but you do see there's a header section here, which really should be head now. They changed that. And then there's a body section down. These are also all capitalized, which we don't do anymore, but that's kind of interesting. But we can see a modern website. Let's go to the New York Times website, and we can do the exact same thing here, but we're going to see it's a much more complicated looking website. If I go to view page source. So here we see the doc type HTML. Here we see our first HTML tag. There's some other stuff inside there called attributes. We'll go over that a little bit later. But we see the HTML. Then we see this is the head section. So the head section is metadata. That's data that we don't actually see on the page, but it does things like it helps search engines know what they're looking at. It gives a title for the website. So if you Google something, that's what shows up when you have the Google results. And it also connects the website to different scripts and things like that. So then after the head section is the body section. The body section is the content that we actually see on the page. And so you can see here, there's a lot of content here. Let's see if we can find, here's like the date. Let's see. So yeah, you can see some content here. You can see like a header here. So you can see all the code that actually gets used to make this website here. So that's a useful tool. If you just right click and you click view page source, you can see the HTML of any website. Okay, so let's write some more. So as we mentioned, the first section we have is called the head section. And that's a nice thing that Replit does for me. It'll actually write my code for me. So if I start with the head section, it knows that I have to close that. So it actually wrote my closing tag for me. And then if I write my body section, it's going to do the same thing. So Replit is going to try to help me out in some cases. Sometimes it's not exactly right, and so you can edit it, but a lot of the time it knows what you're trying to do. Another thing that you'll notice is that my head section and my body section are moved over a little bit. This is a convention in coding where if we have different sections of our document, if these sections are inside of this HTML section, we usually move them over a little bit just so it's easy to see where HTML starts and then it ends down here. So then when we add stuff inside head and inside body, notice that it moves over again. So Replit actually does this for me, and I'm going to start writing a new tag here. And that just makes it easy to read. It doesn't actually change the way the website works. It just makes it really easy to read because basically when I start to add a new element, like the title, we're going to add the title for the web page in a second. We can see that the HTML starts here, and then it goes down to here. We can see head starts here and goes down to here, and then we can see very easily the title is inside of the head. So that helps us organize the code a little bit. Again, it doesn't change the functionality. Like if I had title up here, it would still work. It just looks kind of weird. So normally we do this thing called indentation, where we move over a little bit each time we go into a new tag. Some tags, like my title, I'm just going to write some content here. So for my title, we just write some content. And notice that we're not going to see it on the web view, but if I load this page over here again, if I refresh this, notice that it says my website in the tab. So we don't see it on the page, but you see it on the tab here. And if you Googled something and you came up with this, like if I Googled my website, it's not going to come in Google because I just created it. But this text here, that comes from whatever the title is. So, for all of these different websites, they have a title section, and that determines what we see when we Google the website and it comes up. So that's our first bit of content. So let's stop for a second and review everything that we've looked at so far. Because even though we've just gotten started, we have gone over a lot of probably new things. So again, each one of these guys in between our angle brackets is an HTML tag. So let's put some notes here. Another thing that I can do is write comments. Actually, I kind of forget how to do this in Replit. I think it's Alt question mark. Is it Alt Windows question mark? About Alt Shift question mark. Okay, just going to write it from scratch. So if I want to write a comment, I can write a bracket and then an exclamation point and then 2 dashes. See how it turns green? This means that it's not part of my code. So one thing that we do as programmers a lot is we use comments like this to write notes. So I can write anything I want in between these two angle brackets, this angle bracket, exclamation point, dash, dash, and then it ends with dash, dash, bracket. I can write anything I want here, and it's not going to affect the rest of the website. This is a good way to take notes and write messages to other programmers, and it's good for collaboration and knowing what you're working on. So here I'm going to say, so each thing that is inside the brackets is called the tag. So an HTML tag is this part, and it always, or most of the time, involves a closing tag. So HTML tag and closing. And so there's a couple parts to this. One is the tag itself, the name of the tag, and there's some defaults like HTML, head, body, title. These are all defaults that are part of the language. And then there's the closing tag, and each one of these has to have an open and closed bracket. So if you miss one of these brackets, it's not going to work exactly the way it's supposed to. Let's see if it actually, yeah, so if I miss that bracket, see how the title gets messed up? So you have to make sure to have all of your brackets in the right place. This is a little bit easier with Replit because it does a lot of hinting for you, although it also adds stuff when you don't necessarily want it. And then your closing tag always has a little / at the beginning. So that's how you know that that bit of your website is done. So any content that goes in between the two tags, this can be text, but it can also be other HTML content. So for the title of the website, we just write the content we want, and then we get this title. All right, so let's add some content to the page. So there's different types of HTML content, and we can use some of the default basics. So one of the basics is headers, and most websites have a header at the top, and there's different types of headers. So there's H1, there's H2, H3, I think it goes all the way up to 6. And these are basically different sizes and different levels of importance. So if I make a H1, this is like the most important title. So that would be like on the New York Times website, that would be like their main title of the page. It might be like one of these main headlines, or those might be like H2s or something like that. And so using those different headers, we kind of specify how important the various parts of the website are. Okay, so I'm just going to put a simple header here. I'm going to call this my website. And if I hit Control Enter, we're going to see there's my website. It's nice and big because it's the main title for my website. So, not super exciting, but eventually we'll get to add more stuff to make this a little bit more interesting. So we're just going to add a couple more things today, and then we'll add some more stuff on Thursday as well. But we're almost done actually today. We're just writing a few things just to get started. Okay. So another type of content I can have, the most kind of like basic type of content is a paragraph. And so to make a paragraph, I just do a P like that in between my brackets. And then I can write whatever I want to. I can say, welcome to my website. And then if I hit Control Enter, there we go. We have my website and welcome to my website. So we have the main header and then a paragraph. Notice that these are in different lines because this paragraph, this tag starts and stops over here. This paragraph starts and stops over here. If I actually put a new line here and wrote some more text, so if I put a line in between and I said, I hope you like my website, this is going to show up on the same line. So even though in my code I've moved down a line here, The HTML is actually telling the website how to organize the content. So if the paragraph starts here and ends here, the HTML sees everything inside here as part of the paragraph, regardless of how I might have written it on my actual document. So let's delete this part and go back to my paragraph. Okay, so we have different ways of organizing code or organizing our content. And we'll look at a few more as well. So another thing that I might use on my website for like a menu is I could use a list. And so if I want to make a list, there's a couple different types of lists, but there's a shortcut for a list, which is UL, which stands for unordered list. So that's a list that doesn't have numbers. So if I make a list, I have to have elements inside of the list. So I have my UL. I can hit enter to move down. And then to add an item to my list, I add a list item, and the shorthand for that is LI. And so notice Replit knows all of these things, and it's telling me what to look for. And so I can add a list item. And inside this list item, let's make a couple pages for our website. So I'm going to make an about page. And then I'll make another list item. And what else do I need on my website? I need an about page, and I need a, what else would a website have? Let's have a friends page. We can link to our friends website. Okay, so now if I run this again, so that's our list. Notice there's like a little dot. That's kind of the default formatting. We can get rid of that if we want to, but for now it's fine. We have about and we have friend. Okay, so we can organize content. We can structure our content in different ways using our HTML. Okay, so we're going to go over one more tag, which is sort of a little bit more tricky, but it's going to show us a couple things, both about how HTML works, but also about how to write an attribute inside of our HTML tag. That's the last thing that we're going to cover today, and then we'll do some more stuff on Thursday. Okay, so with my little list here, I want to add links to these pages. These pages don't exist yet, so that's okay. We'll make them later. For now, I'm going to make the links as though the pages exist. And the way I can link something to another, so remember in our default website, or our first website, not default website, there's all these blue pieces of text which link to other pages. That's, again, one of the main cool things about the web is that we can link to lots of stuff. And all websites use this. If we go back to the New York Times, all of these titles are actually links. So, that's something that you guys are used to. You just click on something and it takes us to a new page. Notice that the page up here is changed. Notice that there's a .html at the end. That's an HTML page. And even within this article, the website is the New York Times obviously is a much more sort of robust website. I have to log in. Let's just log. I think I know my BMCC. There we go. Okay. So if I scroll through here, there's other types of content, but then there's links. There's links to the authors for this website, although it's kind of loading slowly. There's links to like references that they've made to other articles. So this is like a link here to another article that they wrote about this topic. Same thing here. These are mostly links to other pages on the New York Times website. So they're just linking to other things that they've written on the same topic. Okay. So these are all called internal links, and that's what we're going to write now. I wonder if I can find any external. No, all of these links are just to other New York Times articles, which makes sense. I don't see any external links. Although these ads are definitely external links. If I clicked on one of these ads, it would take me to this shoe website or this couch website. This is a link to another website. So if I click on here, notice that it opens a new tab over here, and it takes me to this data. Oh, so this is just this is an article with some data that they reference. Okay, so those are links, and most websites have links. We want to be able to add links to our website. So let's talk about how to do that. So let's go back here. We're going to link our about page. We'll link to another page on our site. So to create a link, we have to put an anchor tag around a piece of text. An anchor tag is like our other tags, except it's just an A. So if I put an A like this here, notice that Replit fills in the closing tag for me, but it's doing it before my piece of text, so it's not going to work correctly. If I run this version of it, I can't click on the about link. We have to move this. So sometimes Replit is useful, sometimes it does stuff that we have to undo. So let's put the anchor tag over here. See, again, it's trying to like do all this extra stuff. But anyway, so now when we run this, now our link, still not a link quite yet because we haven't told it where we want it to go. And so that's when we're going to add our first attribute. So an attribute is a piece of information that goes inside of a tag. So let's put that definition here. Attribute is information inside HTML. So that looks like this. You have a tag, then you have an attribute, and then equals a value in quotation marks. And so this is where we can tell different tags to different things. In this case, we're going to do a link. So a link in HTML uses this attribute. It's called href. So when I type that in, Replit tells us it contains a URL or URL fragment that a hyperlink points to. So our URL is just the name for a location, stands for Uniform Resource Locator. Basically, we can just link to different pages either on our website or on other websites. So that's the name of the attribute. After I write an attribute, I have to say what I want it to be equal to. So I put an equal sign here. Notice that Replit is actually giving me some options for what to write, but the page I want to link to doesn't exist yet. So we're going to make that later. So with my attribute, for the value that I give to the attribute, I have to put that in quotation marks. So for quotation marks, I can hold Shift and hit the quotation mark button on my keyboard, and we see those two quotation marks come up. And then I'm just going to write the page that I want to go to, which again, I haven't created yet, but that's okay. We'll create it in a second. So it's just about.html. I'm going to move this over so we can see the whole thing. And I'm going to refresh that. So now see that the text is blue. So I've created a link. The problem is if I click on that page, it doesn't exist yet. So that's not good. But that's okay. We can run our site again, and then we can make that page. So we'll make that page, and then we will keep going. Or that's actually the last thing that we're going to work on. So I'm going to do this again with my friends page. So I'm going to just do A. And this time I'm going to write the whole thing. I'm going to say href equals, I'm going to say friends.html. And then close my href, a tag. And then I'm going to go to the end of friends and then do /a. And Replit helped me write. So now if I run this again, now I have two links on my page. I have the about link, which doesn't go anywhere. And I have the friends link, which doesn't go anywhere. So now let's update this page. And what we're going to do is make these new pages. And to save myself time, I'm going to duplicate my HTML page so I don't have to rewrite everything. So that's the last thing that I'll do. I'm going to go over to index.html. If I hover over here, there's a 3 dots menu. I can click on that and go down to duplicate. And so this makes a copy of my index page. And I can rename this, so I'll call it about.html. And then I can duplicate this again. And I'll call this friends.html. And so now I can edit these separate pages. One thing that I've noticed with Replit is if I click on this page, it's going to open it wherever I selected. So you can move these around. And then if I click on friends, it's going to replace that. So if you want to see multiple pages, you can just drag it up here like that, or you can just leave it and close it. So I'm going to edit this about page. I'm going to actually just take out this comment because that's just some notes on our page. And then since we're on the about page, we don't really need a link to the about page. So let's change this link to a home link. So I'm going to change about.html to index.html, and I'll change the text that we see on the page to home. Okay, so now that's my main page. If I go to about, you can see I have home and I have friends. So I can go back to home, go back to about, so I can link to different parts of my website. So now if I go to my friends page, I'll delete this bit again. I'll leave most of this the same, but now I want to go to my about page. I don't need to go to my friends page, but I want the order to stay the same. So I'm going to actually move this friends.html. I'm going to cut this. So I'm going to select the whole line and hit Control X to cut it. Then I'm going to move up here and hit Enter and hit Control V to paste. And so I'll leave the about link there. And I'm going to change friends just like I did before. I'm going to change this to index.html. And I'll change this text to home. So now when I run the site, I can go to about, I can go to friends, I can go to home, I can go to friends and go to about and go home. All of my pages are linked to all of the other pages. So you might also just have a home link on your home page. A lot of pages have that anyway, so that you don't have to like organize stuff. But this way you're not repeating stuff. Okay, so I'm gonna pause there. And I'll show you guys, as I mentioned before, if you want to work on this site, you can make a copy of it using the fork feature. So I'm going to save this. I put a link to this page in the Discord earlier. Even though I've made edits, that link still goes to the same place. So you can just still click on that link, and it's going to take you to my website. What you can do if you want to make your own copy and change the content is you can click on the drop down here, and there's a menu here, and there's going to be a button that says fork. If you're looking at it, I'm actually going to open it. I'm going to open this in an incognito window. If you open it on your site and you're not logged in as me, you're probably going to see something that looks a little bit different. So let's see. It's still loading, but we'll see what this interface looks like in a second. There we go. So you can see there's a big blue fork button right here. So if you click on that fork button, it's going to make a copy of the project that I just made on your website. And so you'll be able to make changes to it and update it with your own content. So that way you don't have to start from scratch, and you can look at what my stuff looks like. However, you don't have to do that. If you want to type it out from scratch, that's a really good way to get used to writing code. I assume that most of you guys probably have never written code before. So this is a good way to just get familiar. Writing code is obviously very different than using Photoshop or using After Effects, where we're mostly clicking on stuff, dragging stuff around. We're not actually typing on the keyboard. So writing code may be a little bit of a new experience. And so it's a good idea to try it out. Just try typing stuff out, so you'll get a sense of what it feels like. And so you'll be able to practice that. So on Thursday, we're going to look at how to add images and more content to our page. And then next week, we're going to add styles. So we're going to add colors and typography, fonts, and stuff like that. But for now, we're just going to start with these basics. So just try to make a site where you can link to the different pages. Try updating it. You might want to change, the website to your name or to, something that you want to create. You can change the basic content. And ultimately, what we're going to do is make an interactive story. So you can see the example here created by Professor Pincus as the kind of template. This is a choose your own adventure story where you can click on different things to go through different parts of the story. So again, you don't have to do this exactly the same way. If you have other ideas for a website you want to make, a lot of students have like, they want to make a portfolio for their art, or they want to make a website for their own business or brand or something like that. If you have stuff like that that you want to work on, that's perfectly fine as well, as long as you have links and all the basic stuff. So that's what you can sort of think about working towards. All right, I'm going to stop here.